What is your story about? It's a simple question, but it's often one of the most difficult questions new writers will struggle to answer. In fact, I think no matter what your skill level is, you'll end up struggling to answer this question. You might have an answer, but your answer might also just be boring. Or it might be extremely long-winded and convoluted without any direction or identity. This is a question I know that I've struggled with in the past, and I continue to struggle with even to this day. There's something about being told to boil down all of your complex and unique ideas into a single sentence or two, which my brain simply has no capacity to do whatsoever. It might be because this is how we are taught to write in schools. The first things we learn as writers is how to bullshit and pad out our essays. It's the expectation that we attempt to reach a certain word count without really considering whether or not the essay we're writing is a good one. Oftentimes as writers, we can be blinded by all of the nuances of our stories, much in the same way that the morning sun is blinding to us when we wake up. But with today's sponsor, Manta Sleep, that will be a thing of the past. Summer is already on its way, and that means longer and brighter days are ahead. And while all of that extra sunlight can be wonderful, it can also throw off your sleep schedule without you even realizing. Blackout curtains are fine, and they work, but what about when you're on the go for a summer vacation? That's why you should be able to take great sleep with you no matter where you are or what time it is. Guys, I gotta say, when I was approached by Manta Sleep for this, I was a bit skeptical at first. I thought that sleep masks weren't really all that useful, and waking up tired was just a thing that's meant to happen as you grow older. When I say that this sleep mask worked instantly for me, and I became a fan overnight, I quite literally mean it. This is one of those products that simply works, and it works well. And they're willing to help you get better sleep with the code on screen to get 10% off. This sleep mask is an investment, not just in your own comfort, but also in your quality of life while you're awake. You won't know just how tired you were until you wake up feeling refreshed. Head on over to the link in the description and use my discount code to get 10% off at checkout. Anyways, back to the rest of the video. Now, for this video, I'm definitely going to be going into a lot of diatribes and tangents. So if you want an answer to the question that I posed at the beginning of this video, then skip to the portion of the video where I actually answer this question. It should be listed in the chapters down below. If you're along for the ride, however, no matter how you got here, then welcome, and welcome back. You might not understand that if you don't skip ahead, by the way. If you have ever attempted to answer the question, what is your story about, you've likely ran into a lot of issues. You have trouble keeping things condensed down to a simple sentence or two, or you really don't know what your story is about until you're more concerned with the characters in the story than you are with the story itself. I find that there are a lot of writers and artists out there who have a cool and unique idea for their characters, but when it comes down to the world that they live in and the story that they're a part of, it's about as empty as an ice store in a blizzard. Then there are writers who simply have too much to say about their stories. They think that they need to world build every single time they try to convey their story to someone else because the concept is so out there and so difficult to understand that you need to take a prep course just to learn what the story is actually about. It used to be that I had to convey to everyone I met that my story was set in a world run by dragon people, but not actually the scaly D&D Dragonborn type of people. And no, not the Skyrim Dragonborn. I mean like the scaly Dragonborn from Dungeons and Dragons, but like, no, like, it's not those Dragonborns. It's more like people with like horns and tails. No, not like demons. The thing I was getting wrong here is that none of this really has anything at all to do with the story itself. If you're like me and you're writing a story with a bunch of non-human or human-adjacent characters, I found it's often best to just leave that part out. Unless you're trying to go for a sci-fi story with a bunch of extraterrestrials, and that's the vibe that you want to evoke. Even then, though, it's easier when we actually have a term or phrase to call things. In my particular case, I've always struggled with explaining my story to other people because there's not really a name for the type of creature that my characters are, because I made it up. And nowadays, it's a lot more popular to have a dragon person not look like a scaly OC in people's heads thanks to things like VTubers and anime popularizing it. However, if I just say dragon people, oftentimes they'll also think my characters have wings, which they don't. In all actuality, the race that I've created doesn't actually have a popular name, or at least one that sticks in the public zeitgeist and differentiates itself from the typical dragon person that somebody might think of. So I just made one up. Zeosians. Now, what is a Zeosian? Do you care? No, I don't think you actually do. And that's my point. No one cares about your unique and special race that only exists in your story. They are only going to start to care once you introduce something more personal to them that they can relate to. In order to better answer the question, what is your story about? I think it's best to first answer, why should someone care about your story? And if your immediate response is to come from a more argumentative angle or to list off all the reasons I should care about your story, then you've once again strayed from a good answer. Here's what I mean. If I told you, you should care about my story because there are really cool fights in it and the characters are really interesting and there are monsters and dragons in it, would you actually care about my story? I'm betting that even a contrarian or an overly nice person would have trouble saying yes. And that's because I've not really given you a good reason to care about my story. All I've done is tell you about how cool my story is, but I haven't shown you anything to get invested in. When it comes to answering, why should I care about your story, it's important to tackle this from a more immersive standpoint. You need to evoke emotions in the reader or the person that you're talking to, which get them curious and interested in checking things out. No amount of lecturing, info dumping, and complimenting the quality of your story is going to get someone to watch or read it. This brings me to my next point. When you watch a show, what is the reason that you actually watch it? Do you often take recommendations from friends, or do you more often seek out new stories that you know you're going to be interested in? Do you only watch something once there's some buzz in the public forums, or do you try to find diamonds in the rough? For everyone, their answer is going to be different. However, I would bet that no one has ever actually watched a show because someone told them, you should check it out, it's good. And that's a bold claim to make. How could I possibly know that for certain? Because I know the real reasons people watch or read a story. Sure, it might help us along to hear from a friend that something is good, but the statement in and of itself is not always compelling or convincing. The reason we might check it out due to a friend's recommendation might be because we view our friend's opinion as credible, knowing that perhaps in the past their recommendations have been good, and so we are assured that their recommendation now is worth watching. Most, if not all of us, require something else other than a simple recommendation. We require time in the day, multiple recommendations from multiple different people, and a synopsis of the plot. Yet there are many of us who still won't pull the trigger on something even when we have all of that. If telling someone that something is better or good or amazing was enough to get people to buy or watch it, everybody would be using Linux. And if just telling me an anime was good to get me to watch it, then I would have watched JoJo's Bizarre Adventure by now. That's not to say that I think JoJo's Bizarre Adventure is bad. In fact, I've tried numerous times to put it on my watch list only to continue procrastinating simply because nothing I've heard nor seen about the show has ever made me want to watch it. JoJo's is likely one of those stories which appeals to a certain niche, and it appeals very strongly to that niche, which is why there are so many die-hard fans of it. It's not meant to be made for everyone, but the people who enjoy it most certainly want to make sure that everyone has a chance to at least see it. It's a cult classic for a reason, and I'm sure there are plenty of good reasons to watch. But there's always one thing that's missing from a recommendation: a reason I should care. Yes, JoJo's is good. Why is it good? What is a part of the story which resonates with you? Can you explain why something is cool? Can you walk me through and get me hooked on the concept? As it stands, you see what I did there? The concept of JoJo's on its face just doesn't appeal to me. Okay, so we've got a mask that turns people into vampires, and then in the next season, we're fighting a bunch of ancient Mexicans, and then we've got a bunch of spirits called stands who do all the fighting for our characters, and if you zoom out to somebody who's not a stand user, it looks like they're having a mental battle and standing in front of each other and doing nothing. On its face, it lives up to the idea of JoJo's being a bizarre adventure. However, I've not really been told much about the story or why people actually like it. I've not been given a good idea of why I should care about this show, which is about vampires, resurrected Mexicans, and ghosts who can punch people really hard. I've seen clips, but I rarely understand the context, and the lack of context doesn't get me interested. I'm sure that if I sat down and watched the show, I might actually enjoy it. I'm sure that if I forced myself to watch it, I could find what people actually like about it. But once again, I don't care enough. The recommendation of a story and the promise that it's good is not what gets people to actually want to watch something. It gets people to look in the direction of the story, but it doesn't get them to consume it. No, for most things, human beings are pretty superficial. The thing which often gets us to watch a certain show, for example, is a friend actually sitting down and showing it to us instead of just telling us to go watch it. The thing that gets us to watch something is whether or not we like the concept of what we've heard so far in the first place. We're already predetermined to watch it as soon as we know about it. It's what we associate with the story that's recommended to us, not the recommendation in and of itself. People can tell us all day to watch something because it's good, but until we're shown a good reason to watch, such as a cool fight scene or a funny joke that we really liked, or an awesome song in the show, or an immaculate vibe that we just can't help but resonate with, then otherwise we're just not going to do anything about it. So why should I care about your story? My personal answer is, if you like the tactical combat of something like Hunter x Hunter and the spiritual exploration of a magic system like Avatar: The Last Airbender, then you are going to love my story. Now, is that going to get everyone interested in my story? No. Is it going to get every Hunter x Hunter and Atla fan interested in my story? No, it's not. However, I think it's a lot more interesting than the prior example that I used, and it might have at least captured the attention of some of you. Until you figure out that my story is actually a book, and the only reason you can read it online is basically because it's a rough draft that I've posted publicly. I think there's a fear or a resistance in the minds of a lot of writers when it comes to relating their stories to their inspirations. I think a lot of people are afraid that the comparison will make people think that they're just a knockoff version of what their inspirations are, and that they haven't properly differentiated their story from the ones that inspired it, and that they're always living in the shadows of those greater stories. People often think that they need to be original, or that originality is what makes a story unique and interesting. The simple fact is, originality is an illusion. It simply doesn't exist, and it never will. Human beings build upon foundations of what existed before us. We use the world around us to inspire our stories and ideas. Airplanes can be considered original ideas until you realize that they were inspired by birds. Scuba gear is just a human thinking that we should be able to breathe like a fish, and so we do. A computer is the product of numerous people making multiple iterations of a calculator until we figured out that we can boil anything down to a series of yes and no questions. A series of ones and zeros in an order, the combination of which can be unique, but the building blocks of which, the ones and zeros, have always existed. Your writing and your story is the same way. Do not be ashamed of your inspirations. Do not shy away from relating your story to another, even if it's not a story which necessarily inspired your story. It might still be a story which is similar enough to help describe your story and get people interested in it. Terraria is the most highly rated video game on Steam to date. It is overwhelmingly positive, and in many ways, it is its own game. However, I think there are still people to this day who will refer to Terraria as Minecraft, but 2D. Yes, that's a wild oversimplification of Terraria. There are so many things to enjoy about the game, and it is the highest rated game on Steam for a reason. But these are not reasons to care. The reason you should actually care about Terraria is the same reason you might enjoy playing Minecraft. You like block games where you can harvest materials, build structures, and fight monsters with all of the new equipment that those materials can give you. The answer to the question, why should I care about your story, does not need to be an explanation nor an argument. It needs to be a promise. If you like Minecraft, you will like Terraria. That's a promise. If you like Atla or Hunter x Hunter or JJK, you will like my story. When I was growing up, I had a bit of a chip on my shoulder. You see, I grew up as a wrestler for most of my life, and for those who don't know, wrestling is a very difficult and physically demanding sport. With all of that difficulty comes perseverance and competence, and with those comes pride. Growing up, I recall that I always had a sour opinion of pro wrestling, as all of the moves were real and all of the storylines were real. Now, eventually, the kid me discovered, just by looking at it, that this was not real wrestling. I rushed to the other children my age to tell them all the classic phrase that every pro wrestling fan hates to hear. Wrestling is fake. I felt like that guy in the one parable where he goes up from beneath the ground to see the real sun and then goes back underground to tell everybody about it, and then they call him crazy. What was that one called? Is it like Aristotle, the allegory of the cave? Yeah, that one. I was about to type it in, but I know the answer to that. I'm smart. I still read sometimes. I did the real wrestling. I was the real wrestler. Not only do I think they have some of the best video essays on YouTube, but no matter what the topic is, he always finds a way to get me invested in it. So, help him out a little bit. He's a small creator. Recently, YouTube continually sent me a video from him about pro wrestling. Initially, I resisted clicking on the video simply because I am not all that interested in pro wrestling. However, I am interested in watching Super Eye Patch Wolf videos. So once the video title was catchy enough for me to click, then that's what I did. And oh man, you guys should definitely go and watch that video. This single video destroyed anything and everything which had been holding me back from getting invested in pro wrestling. Super Eye Patch Wolf didn't just tell me that pro wrestling was good. He showed me why it was good. He showed me what he enjoyed about it as a fan and why I should enjoy it too. I got to learn about the history of pro wrestling, not just in the continuity of pro wrestling, but in the context surrounding it. I got to know all about the reality behind pro wrestling and what happened behind the scenes and in the business, and how it affected the storylines told in the fictional world of pro wrestling. Every wrestler is their own. This brings me to my next point, because sometimes the best way to get someone in. Yes, I know there are a lot of people out there who hate spoilers. If they know a spoiler in the show, then they have no reason to watch it. But to me, that just says that the spoiler in question just wasn't interesting to them in the first place. I think we can actually determine if you're a person who actually likes spoilers with a simple test. When you were younger, or even now, when you picked up a book for the first time, what did you do to get yourself invested? Did you read the back of the book? Did you read the first chapter? Or did you go to the last page of the book and read it? If you're like me, then the majority of the books you've read are books which you flip to the back of the page to read the ending of first. And with that ending in mind, you begin to wonder why it ended that way. When you're reading the story, the last page is always on your mind. It's pulling you towards it, always begging the question, how does this story end? And why? How did the events of the story lead to the ending that you've just read. In fact, I think I've enjoyed stories a lot more when I know how they end while I'm reading them than the stories which I start completely blind. Not only that, but there is scientific evidence to support this idea. Nicholas Christianfield poses that spoilers don't ruin a story, they enhance it. We don't need to know how the story ends, we just need to know at least one thing that happens in it. Not from the beginning or from its premise, but from anywhere past the midway point. A spoiler can give people the thing that we're all lacking from a synopsis or a recommendation. A reason to care and a reason to get invested. We are always seeking a promise and an example. Of course, you probably shouldn't spoil a mystery or a massive reveal. At least not always. Because in all actuality, sometimes knowing who the murderer is can actually help you enjoy the story more than if you didn't. There's a reason some people will watch or reread the same story multiple times. That's because there's always going to be something new that we discover, even when we know how the story is meant to go. We discover hidden meaning and subtle nuances which allow us to better appreciate what we've just consumed. A spoiler is more akin to cooking something before you eat it. In most cases, it allows you to digest the story better. But that doesn't mean that there aren't some things, such as fruit or sushi, which aren't better without spoilers. It just means that sometimes you've got to spoil your story for people a little bit just to get them more invested in your concept. Now, am I going to spoil my story for you in an effort to get you interested in it? No, not yet. And that's because there's a strategic way that you, as the writer of your story, must intentionally spoil it without actually spoiling it. Let's come back to the question posed at the beginning of the video. If you've skipped to this portion of the video to discover how to answer this question, then you, my friend, are the exact type of person I was just talking about. You might be interested in watching the rest of my video to learn exactly what type of person you are. But to wrap everything up in a nice little bow, and to answer the question of what is your story about, it's very simple. You tell people what it means to you and what it could mean to them. You form an identity for your story which people can easily relate other things to. This is the reason we have genres, categories, and tropes. There's a reason we have stories which all have the same core fundamental principles. Avatar: The Last Airbender is a story about an airbender named Aang who must master the four elements to defeat the evil Fire Lord Ozai and bring peace to the four nations. Or, in the way that the show puts it, water, earth, fire, air. Long ago, the four nations lived together in harmony. Then, everything changed when the Fire Nation attacked. Only the Avatar, master of all four elements, could stop them. But when the world needed him most, he vanished. 100 years passed, and my brother and I discovered the new Avatar, an airbender named Aang. And although his airbending skills are great, he has a lot to learn before he's ready to save anyone. But I believe Aang can save the world. You know? I love that shit. And this is an ideal example for how to get people invested in your story. You're not just telling people the premise, you're showing the identity of the show. In this instance, Avatar: The Last Airbender is showing us that their show is about Aang growing to become the new Avatar, where he will then save the world. You don't need to tell anyone about the deep characters, the rich storytelling, or the unique world building of Avatar. You don't need to mention that there are flying bison in the world and that there is no war in Ba Sing Se, or that Prince Zuko has one of the most well-written villain-to-hero redemption arcs in all of fiction. You just need to show people the premise, the problem, and the ultimate ending goal of the story. And did you notice something about that? If you skip to this portion of the video, you might not know what I'm talking about, but for those who didn't, and for those who watched the whole video, you might notice a little nuance there. We all know how Avatar: The Last Airbender is meant to end, don't we? We all know Aang is going to defeat the Fire Lord. We all know what the last page of this book is going to look like. We've always known that. What we do not know, however, are all of the cool and interesting events which lead up to that last page. It's been in front of you the entire time. You've just never realized it. In order to show the identity of your story, you must first know how you want it to end. And if you know how you want it to end, then give people an idea of how it's going to get to that point. In other words, my story is about a young lowborn named Drikey Eric, who must evade flesh traders, fight evil monsters, and overthrow the corrupt aristocracy which killed his father as he develops his skills to one day inherit his mentor's sword and become a champion of Ataro. Also, his mother's very hot, and here are several pictures of her that I've commissioned, and also she could snap your neck with one arm and rock a baby to sleep with the other. Thank you for watching. Join my channel members for a personal critique of your writing from me personally, and start writing or whatever. Okay, bye.